All right, so if you haven't seen the previous post, you might take a look at that. But the short version is that Dallas Police Association President Mike Matta, who tried to do an end run around me and get my article last year about the Amber Geiger shooting, that he was heavily involved in the aftermath of. Trying to get this article tamped down and get something removed in which I pointed out that he had kind of accidentally let slip that Amber Geiger still had access to her phone after killing her neighbor, which is unusual. And he sent a message to my editor. He seems not to have been aware of my background because he tried to convince us that it's normal for a suspect or someone in a shooting who has not yet been arrested even to have ongoing access to their phone. And in this email, which I posted the screenshot of an hour ago, which is now being spread around by some of the policy people and the 5 or 10% of the Dallasites, who matter, who are actually worthwhile people, including my former city councilman. They're all kind of sharing that around. But ultimately, there is a serious threshold to be met if we are to force the 3 major print press outlets in Dallas to acknowledge this. And one of them, Jim Schutz, the editor of Dallas Observer, as per his post this morning that I just saw, he's not even acknowledging the fact that Amber Geiger has now been caught, has been revealed to have deleted the most relevant existing evidence, text messages from her to her partner, in which she was sexting with him in the minutes leading up to her shooting Botham Jean. As I noticed in that as I explained in that post, as I explained there, her only defense, given what this case centers on, which is her state of mind and the circumstances and blah, blah, and the split-second decisions, has always been, and I note this back then in my article, which this concerns, the article that led to the bomb threat that ultimately ended my career down here, thankfully, I guess. This was always going to be about her state of mind at the time, and the messages in which she is asking her partner for nudes and engaging in low-end, what mediocre people, what passes among them for sexting. It's not very imaginative. It's really not erotic because it lacks a certain intelligence, a certain agency. They might as well just be standing next to each other, just masturbating, because they just lack the humanity. They lack the sort of the sentience to really properly sext each other in a way that I would look at and say, oh, that's hot, And I'm not someone who's really done much sexting myself, I'm not trying to say I'm an aficionado, but she was doing it right before she shot her neighbor to death and then tried to cover it up. And previously, according to the Dallas police and Mike Matta and everyone else, her defense team and the press down here, it was said that she was simply exhausted from all of her hard work protecting and serving the public. Sorry for the delay. I was trying to find Mike Matta's phone number. And rather than being exhausted and just not able to concentrate, and thus so she stumbled into the wrong apartment and shot, Botham Jean. And hey, that could have happened to anybody who's a fucking idiot. Turns out she was just simply distracted by the dick. She was thinking about that dick. Now, that's something that I guess if someone is having sexual thoughts, perhaps, and daydreaming, that's one thing. But in this case, she is actively texting and whatever the fuck with her partner on the force there, that's another issue. But it's actually given everything else, it's actually not even a scandal, that part. Let's call Mike Maddow. Okay, so Mike Maddow and I had a whole thing described and briefed in that last post. When he did reach out to me, I knew that part of his email asking for a correction was false and disingenuous. I didn't let him know that. I tried to get him to call me on the grounds that I wanted to ask about the marijuana they had found in Botham Jean's apartment, which was, a big deal, if you recall. This guy a cop came into his apartment and shot him, and then gave conflicting versions of how that happened. He had some marijuana somewhere in his apartment, and that was something that the police and the local fascist press and the in addition to the incompetent non-fascist press, that's just incompetent. They thought that was worth attention. What they didn't think was worth attention was the anti-Black Lives Matter memes and all this stuff that we dug up back then, and that Dallas Morning News never quite got around to noting. Anyway, long story, a lot of grievances here. Let's just call Mike Maddow. Dallas Police Union president, heavily involved in overseeing the cover-up of the murder by a former police officer of Botham Jean, a black resident of Dallas, whose trial is ongoing. So let's call that for the speaker.
Hello.
Yes, Mr. Maddow?
Yes.
How you doing? So I had a quick question for you, and I don't know if you remember me. You and I spoke briefly late last year. You had sent an email to my editor regarding an article about Amber Geiger. You claimed that you guys had Amber Geiger's phone, that she gave it up voluntarily, and now it turns out that she deleted the text messages in which she was sexting with her partner, and thus distracted when she shot that guy that she murdered. This is Barrett Brown, by the way. Sorry, I forgot to mention that at the very beginning.
I'm sorry. Who is this?
This is Barrett. This is Barrett Brown. Remember me?
Mr. Brown.
Yes. We had this running altercation for the last year, so I wanted to ask you about that. Like, when did she give up the phone? And I guess I'm assuming it was after the day after the killing, when she deleted the messages. Also, I have a case number here from a report I made 5 days ago about the guy that Assistant Chief Lonzo Anderson wrote an email about to Philip Kingston, claiming he was going to be charged for this. Turns out he wasn't. I've got some other recordings of Sergeant Sheldon Smith.
Was going to be charged for what?
So there was an incident late last year, a couple of weeks after you and I had this altercation, actually.
An altercation would describe some type of physical contact.
No, altercation.
I don't think that's an altercation.
No, the word does not inherently refer to physical contact. It means a dispute. You can say a physical altercation, which is why people say that. That modifies the term. But anyway, we'll call it a dispute, whatever you. That's fine.
Okay, that's a much nicer word. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Dispute is okay. A few weeks after that, there was a bomb threat that was emailed into D Magazine, the magazine for which I used to write, the one that you emailed about my article. And
the one that I commonly do articles with and interviews with. Any issues at all? Yeah, no problem. Yeah, that one. Go ahead.
Yeah. Anyway, so bomb threat was made by a guy under his own name via Facebook to that magazine, saying that he would blow it up if they continued to run articles by Barrett Brown. And so
that's horrible.
Yeah, I thought so too. I guess the editor did, and they called the DPD and Dallas FBI. Dallas FBI came, took a statement from Tim Rogers and I guess others present, and then they kind of disappeared for a few days. And Tim Rogers didn't know what happened. And so, meanwhile, I had reached out to Philip Kingston because the Dallas police had told him not to make this public, not to say anything about this bomb threat publicly. They did that like within an hour of responding. I guess it would have been a detective. What is his last name? Detective Emerson. Yeah, Detective Emerson. He works under Sheldon Smith. He was the investigator on this originally, and then they shuffled around. So anyway, asked him to do that. I thought was odd, so I kind of made it public. Didn't mention the magazine in any circumstance. Just said, "Hey, there's a bomb threat was made over my articles." Blah blah. come to find out from Philip Kingston, who inquired with Assistant Police Chief Lonzo Anderson. He tells them, oh yeah, so this guy, he posted under his own name, so it wasn't that hard to figure out who it was. He was detained, brought in. You can see the exact quote from the email, but claims basically that he was being charged with 2 different offenses: one for threatening to blow up the Dallas Public Library downtown branch the same day, and another for threatening me and D Magazine. Then Emerson tells Tim Rogers something different. So Tim Rogers, even though he's not like me, he's not somebody who's really anti-police. He's more fair than I am. I'll put it that way. In that respect.
Yeah, that's obvious. Okay.
Right. Yeah. He got suspicious by this point too. Like I said, it's obvious he's very fair, but he got suspicious because different things were being said. So he recorded the next phone call between himself and Emerson. And Emerson is on recording saying, I told you not to tell Mr. Barrett. He refers to me as Mr. Barrett. I think that's a police thing. Refers to having told him not to tell me any details about this threat that is made directed at me in my articles, and sort of berates him because he eventually put up an article explaining that this thing had happened. This bomb threat had happened. They called the police. They got these different explanations. Anyway, long story short, I don't want to waste a whole lot of time here. That was last November. And here we are in September of next year, and I've got about 6 or 7 different recordings of high-ranking Dallas police officers, Sheldon Smith, Lonzo Anderson, Emerson, investigator, in which they are either admitting that their lies were told or false information was given to city council and then not corrected, or claiming that there was a cover-up or claiming that there was no cover-up, and et cetera, et cetera. And turns out they also, Sheldon Smith in particular, I don't know if you know him real well. Actually, no, I recall you guys actually work together pretty closely. So you know him.
How is that? How do I work with him pretty closely?
If you will refer to the article in which you quoted a few months ago regarding the reshuffling of detectives and some of the investigation apparatus.
He's an association president of a different association.
Well, I know, but you work together.
I've done articles with George Aranda. I've done articles with other association presidents.
Well, I mean, when I say done, you're both quoted in the article, but you guys are working together on this particular issue.
So one particular idea or event that we agreed upon. Okay.
Well, there's a number of them, and again, remember that I have friends from former city council and all that. So I mean, this isn't stuff I just felt the turnip truck. I mean, again, I know you're not, brothers. I mean, I know you're not twin brothers. I understand that are not the same people. What I'm saying is that you're both quoted on this, and you work on the same issues together. And I'm sure there's areas of disagreements. In fact, I can probably think of some things that you disagree on.
What do you need me to do?
Well, okay. Well, before you asked about before you started about the relationship between you and Mr. Sargent, as I was saying, he is on tape saying that they did a thorough investigation into Wesley Taylor Jr.'s Facebook account, and said they just couldn't find any evidence that this guy was sending threats, that it may have been somebody maybe got on his computer and made that threat. And it turns out that he's been making bomb threats, violent rape threats to kill people, and rape threats for 3 years from that same account, including to the lead singer of Tripping Daisy in Polyphonics Free now.
That's horrible.
Yeah, and a week ago, he threatens to kill Beto O'Rourke, threatened to kill me, myself, rape my mother, and this is all in the same Facebook account that has been going on, that was involved in the bomb threat that we got this contradictory information from. And that happened about a week ago. I called 911 finally, and got a case number right here. Haven't heard anything back. It's been a number of days, and so in another sense, it's been.
What do you want me to do about that?
Well, here's the thing. I understand you're really you are heavily involved in police issues. Would that be fair to say? Like you're involved in like policy, whether it be the curfew, legalization of pot or decriminalization or changes in the pot policy. Here's an issue we have here that I think is really interesting. Every violent threat made towards the press in the U.S., especially these days, is reported immediately by the outlets, and in no case whatsoever that I can name, and I work with press freedom organizations, one of which wrote about this whole incident. Never have the police or FBI or any law enforcement body told the victims to keep the crime quiet for any length of time.
Sounds like something you need to bring to the attention of the public.
Well,
that's what you are supposed to do as a reporter.
Yeah, that's in my upcoming book coming out next year. I went and spoke to city council about it, recorded that. I, there's some articles about it.
Absolutely, you ought to shout it from the mountain.
Right. I also wanted to bring it to your attention, just because I know that given, some of the things you've been involved in, especially this, I understand that, providing a sense of the integrity of the Dallas police force is important to you. And I understand that you're a public face.
There's nothing I can do to force them to press charges. First of all, that.
Oh, no, I'm aware of that. I mean, again, and the police officer came and responded the other day and talked to me, explained the same thing. And I told him I understand, they may throw it away. I know how things work. I've been in prison for 4 years. I've seen gang politics. I know how politics works, and I'm from Dallas, just like all of us. So, I know how things actually are. So I'm not asking you to force anybody to do anything over there. I mean, you're no longer part of the department. You are the union head.
No, I am part of the department. I work every single day on the streets.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, I'm an actual patrol officer. I'm sergeant, supervisor. I work every single, I work 4 days a week, so I'm on fourth watch, 10 hours a day, and then I work here on my own time.
Okay, well, that's an error on my part, because I didn't realize that. I thought that you retired and then you were now president.
No, I'm an active officer. I take reports. I go to jail. I pull people over. I cover officers on calls. Not before last, I answered 14 calls. So, I do the same thing that every other officer does.
Right, and you accompany people who have been charged with manslaughter to the Kaufman County jail facility.
On my own time, absolutely.
Right.
That's my time. What I do on my personal time as a representative of an organization, absolutely. Just like I've done, not just with her, I've done with numerous officers who have been charged with a crime that is job related. Now, you may not agree that it's job related, and maybe, be honest with you, maybe I don't agree that it's job related, but she was charged.
Oh, I actually don't disagree.
On-duty police shooting.
Right.
No, when that happens, I have to fall back on our Constitution and bylaws, and I don't have a choice in some situations. You may not believe that, but when I swear to uphold our Constitution, and I mean our association Constitution bylaws, I have to uphold them, whether I agree with all of them or not, because I don't make them. The board makes them, and the body of the membership agrees and votes them in. So,
I actually agree with all of that. Again, I don't dispute that this is part of. I mean, you are, you have colleagues, you have something you believe in that you're a part of, and you defend it. And in this case, the specifics.
And I'll tell you what, Barrett, I'll give you this. In 2 years, you ain't going to hear about me anymore because I'll be gone. I'll be retired and gone about my way.
I've got a long list of people, that's okay. There's plenty more where we all came from.
Well, that's what I'm saying. There'll just be somebody else in my chair. I'm saying it's not personal.
Oh, no, I understand.
It's just a job function. I do my job function to the best of my ability. Yeah. And then at some point, I move over, and it's somebody else's job to do that.
No, it's not virtual for me. I can assure you I'm dead inside. So, no, I don't dispute at all that it was your right as representative to assist with Amber Geiger. I mean, it's your duty, I would say, in many cases, to do so. Again, so the main question I was going with before I referred to this bomb threat, the reason I went into this at such length is because there is this, if you're a detective or an officer and whether you are evaluating a scene or later on writing a formal report or writing a search warrant application or whatever, you're looking at cause and effect, and you can't always prove cause and effect. Causation is not causality, etc. But sometimes it becomes clear over time. So it just occurs to me that everything about the handling of that bomb threat thing was unusual, and it's unusual to the extent that your own officers have noted that finally.
Well, I mean, I'm just going to say this. There's a lot of information that, obviously I'm getting your side of something, and I don't have the other side of the reasons why they handled it the way they did. And maybe they handled it improperly. I'm not saying that they didn't. I don't know. That's privileged information that I'm not, that I'm not privy to that information. Right. And so I would hope that they did their due diligence, and for whatever reason they didn't charge this guy. If they did, I don't know. They have their reasons, and if they didn't, then you deserve to have a reason, an explanation why.
Right.
And if you don't think you're getting that, then you take whatever necessary steps you think you need to take to get that information. You're well within your right to get it.
Certainly, and I appreciate that. I understand where you're coming from. But really, so again, that is, like I said, it's not your problem. It's not something that falls under your review. Again, you're right. You don't have the other side. If you wanted to, you could read. You can see the statements that are put out by the police, kind of privately to D Magazine and all that. But actually, I don't even know all of it. But back to the main point that I called you about, and again, I don't want to take up more of your time. I wanted to ask again. So this email you had sent when you and I first kind of met, you sent this email regarding my article last year, and just to refresh your memory, because I'm sure I know you deal with the press a lot. I had written the following in this article, and Tim Rogers looked at it and said, "Wait, we should probably correct this." And then we thought about it, and we didn't change it. But let me read exactly what it says, so I'm representing it properly. Sorry, and it was mostly about the Dallas Morning News, which I happen to hate. I know them, you may not, but I do.
There's no, trust me, a lot of people in the police world do not care for the Dallas Morning News.
Well, that's normal. It's normal for them to be trustful of the press in general. I bet I hate the press.
That's not true.
That's
not true. I mean, I think the Observer has some very good, people who write from there. I think the Dallas D Magazine has some good people that write for them. To be honest with you, I think there's quite a few reporters within the Dallas Morning News that write well. The problem is sometimes they don't fact check, and that's unfortunate because there was a time in history when reporters actually reported actual facts that they, verified, and didn't use the source. And anybody, as well as I, anybody can be a reporter now if you just
absolutely
or label themselves a piece of the media.
Yeah, and you're preaching to the choir. I absolutely agree. That is one of the fundamental problems. It's actually the reason why I'm usually messing with the press and not with you guys these days. But I guess so. Here's what I'd written back then that you had emailed about. I was talking about Dana Branham. I'm sure she's still there at the Dallas Morning News. Branham goes on to paraphrase Dallas Police Association head Mike Matta at great length about such extenuating factors as police overwork and his supposed concerns about Geiger's safety. Quote, Geiger had received threats online and through her phone, unquote, she reports, citing no particular evidence other than the claims of Mata. I'm sorry, is your name most pronounced Mata or Matta, or I'm assuming you're used to Matta, the Texas kind of
yeah,
okay.
That's good enough, man.
All right.
It doesn't even wear me out anymore. Right. That's fine. I appreciate you asking, though.
Yeah, no problem. Anyway, so citing no particular evidence other than the claims of Mata, who in the course of asserting that Geiger has received, quote, texts, unquote, but is currently, quote, safe, unquote, rather foolishly reveals that a manslaughter suspect who may ultimately be charged with murder, called that one, by a grand jury, seems not to have had her phone taken up as evidence during a 3-day grace period, or perhaps even afterward. Botham Jean's iPhone, meanwhile, didn't take it as evidence. Now, I should note, and that's the end of the excerpt there, I should note that, in fairness, I think I could not actually show, nor would I even necessarily think upon rereading that it was clear that she hadn't had her phone taken up.
Okay, well, let me just clarify there for you.
Right.
Because her phone was taken that night and it was dumped. Do you know what dumped means?
Yeah, they take the data off it.
Exactly.
Yep.
She dumped it. Okay, so physically, did she have her phone? Absolutely. But that night, she willingly, no warrant necessary, just like when she did a blood draw.
Right.
She willingly gave consent to search her apartment, to take her phone, and do a blood draw without a warrant.
Okay, so obviously that does change how things proceed from there. I understand that. So let me ask you, and so here's the question I have.
Sure.
Regarding that, so on the were you in the courtroom today, or have you been? I'm assuming you've been very.
No, because I'm a potential witness, so I.
Oh, I see. I got you. Okay, that makes sense. I'm not used to being in court outside the defendant's dock, so I don't know how those things work all the time. So different view from that angle. Okay, let me read.
I'll give you that one.
Thank you. Well, I used to be a humor writer before I got involved in all this.
Some people say it's still humor, but okay.
Well, I mean, I try. Otherwise, people don't pay attention if it's not funny.
Satire. I think satire is a lost art, so I appreciate that.
It has to be entertaining. Otherwise, you might as well not write it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so this app came out today, and I just saw this in the last couple of hours.
Sure.
And so it says here, and this is now again, I also being a defendant over and over again throughout my life. I know that what a prosecutor claims in court and what the press reports that means has very little relation to what happened necessarily, or it need not, and that's true more than okay. And because you're around these things, you see them up close, you're there for things.
Yes, sir.
And so, and it says here that she deleted the messages, and so did her. The day after the shooting, here's a quote from the article. Quote, prosecutors also revealed that the day after the shooting, Geiger and Rivera had deleted their text messages to each other, but they were later recovered, unquote. So I'm assuming the recovery comes from the dump, of course. So she either didn't realize, or I mean, did she understand? I mean, again, this is a question
I don't know what she's thinking. The first I have heard of this was in trial 2, because I know a lot of people don't believe this, but I do not have conversations with our attorneys and their clients. That's none of my business. I stay completely out of that, specifically because, one, I don't want to be on a stand unless I absolutely have to, and two, to be honest with you, it's none of my business. That's not my job, right?
No, I understand that.
The first I had heard about this is just like you when people had told me. So I would assume, this is just me assuming, I would assume that they probably deleted sexting messages because he was married.
Right. And not for any other reason.
I mean, if I'm sexting with somebody.
Right. I understand that. I mean, that's.
If I'm sexting with somebody, the last person I want to see that is my wife.
Oh, yeah, especially not on national news. I mean, I can understand that.
Well, I mean, I think that was before they knew this was going to be national news. I don't think anybody at that time knew it was national news. I bet you they were just clearing the deck. So he wouldn't inadvertently leave his phone open, or she would ask to see his phone, and he's got whatever pictures or whatever comments on there. So
yeah, so it was less about.
I don't think there was inherently anything to do with hiding evidence per se. It was more like hiding evidence of it, infidelity.
Well, what you said actually just is a good point. I agree that early on they would not have had any reason to know this national news, and thus that it's going to necessarily get out that way. And so it does seem that taking away that factor, of that sex stuff getting out, I can see why, given what the defense has been from the very beginning, that she was totally exhausted from a long day of work and all that, and that is the state of mind she was in, and those are the circumstances under which she, by accident, without any undue lack of regard, whatever the legal term is, shot her neighbor. And it would seem that I think one can make the case that, given that instead she was engaging in these sexual text messages with her partner, which again is their business, just like if they're smoking pot in their own apartment, like Botham Jean apparently was.
That's his house.
Right.
Do what he wants.
It seems to be that in that case, that would be something that would interfere with that defense, because rather than being exhausted and all that, it seems like she's perhaps distracted, and that's a different news. Yes, certainly.
Are you married?
No, never.
Okay. Let me explain something to you about being married. And I'm just putting this in an idea, because I work 16, 18-hour days a lot of times.
Gotcha.
Okay? I go home, I am dog tired most often than not. I lay my head down, within 3 minutes, I'm out. Okay? But I'm going to promise you this. If I'm driving home after working 18 solid hours and my wife tells me, hey, I am ready when you come home,
right,
I promise you this. I will eager up enough energy to at least give her 3 minutes of the best time of her life.
Well, you're a better man than I'll tell you that.
You know as well as I don't know how old you are.
I'm 38.
I'm sorry?
I'm 38.
Okay, so you know when you were in your 20s. In my 20s, if I had the opportunity to get some, I'm all over it. I don't care how tired I am. But hell, I'll be honest with you, I'm 50 and I'll do that. It just ain't going to be as good as when I was 20. So the idea that a person doesn't have enough energy to have sexual intercourse when we're all human beings, I find that hard to believe. And secondly, I didn't hear this personally, but I heard from other people tell me who watched the the testimony is that he even said, being her ex-partner or whatever, is that they had no intention of meeting up that night. He had already had plans with his kids.
Well, no, I don't think anybody's.
Night,
I don't think anybody's saying that they had intention to meet up. What she had asked him in one of the previous texts was, "Want to touch?" So I mean, she was trying to get him to.
And he didn't. He wasn't even going over to her house.
Oh yeah, I mean, again, I don't know anything about this guy. I've just learned his name today, and I have no. It's not my business to speculate about the nature of the relationship. I think really the focus here regarding the case, regarding the element of the case that is most at stake legally, and I think in terms of speculation that's gone on for a year, is what was her state of mind, and is it because she was exhausted and overworked, or was it because of these things that she did in which she and her partner both deleted the evidence of, in which she was distracted, which is not a sympathetic story.
The sexting, and correct me if I'm wrong, because like I said, I didn't get to see testimony, maybe you have, but I'm just from what I've been told. The sexting was during work and while she was driving home, right?
Let's see here. Let me see, make sure exactly. I don't want to tell you the wrong thing. A 16-minute phone conversation that ended as she arrived at her apartment, and then she parked on the 4th level. And then she sent him a text message as she was walking up to her apartment that said, "I need you, hurry." And then
I think that was after. "I need you, hurry" was after the event, not before.
So what time was he killed then? Because it's saying here 10:02.
It was before. The shooting happened before 10:02.
Okay. Well, it said,
I'm not positive, but I know it was before 10 o'clock because the officer assist came out at 10:01.
Oh, okay. So I'm assuming they've synchronized the times and accounted for I'm assuming they're basing this on the actual time as registered, by law enforcement and all that, not by your phone says 3:02, my phone says 3:07. I'm assuming this is all kind of okay. So she said, "I need you, hurry," in a message to him after she killed Botham Jean, and then a minute later said, "I fucked up." And so you're saying, so this is clearly after she killed Botham Jean and these messages.
That's what it sounds like to me.
So she was texting her paramour, her partner also, but they were off, they were off duty. And I guess he didn't go to the scene. I mean, obviously that.
No.
Okay.
From what I understand, he didn't.
Right. That wouldn't be something. Right. And if he did, that would be unusual. Be kind of against protocol. So she was probably I'm sure she's very. Oh, it wouldn't be.
Because everybody's allowed a companion officer, and that can be anybody you want. And so at that time, nobody would have known except them that they had a relationship. And it's very common for a partner to call their partner if they're involved in an incident like this.
Oh yeah, I mean we have a lot of promiscuity in my in the activism and anarchy field, so I understand that, and I totally understand also that being the first message. So it says here she sent that message while she was on the phone with 911 during that one call. So I guess I don't know when the actual. Well, again, that's what prosecutors are claiming, and sorry.
Went first before the assist.
I'm sorry, I missed that.
It had to be after she was already off 911 because the assist had already came out.
Oh, well, I mean, you'll have a chance to testify to that because the prosecutors are sitting there. And again, these are Dallas prosecutors. I've been in Lou Sterrett probably 4 or 5 times altogether, and I've been in the federal building, and I've got a whole book coming out about the federal prosecutors. And so, but they're saying here, according to NBC News, prosecutors said that occurred while Geiger was on the phone with 911. So I don't know if that means that they're saying that she was on the call, but also texting while the call was on. I guess some phones can do that. I don't know what they're, if they're going to prove that or if that's something a judge is going to pay attention to. I can tell you that, I wouldn't be surprised if they did. So that's something that if you think it's material, you might want to ask to be focused upon because again, this is, judges aren't, they're not God, and sometimes they miss things. So if the prosecutors are lying, suddenly I don't have a dog in the fight anymore. Suddenly I'm against everybody. So.
I guarantee you the prosecution of this, I've already heard today.
Well, I think I got pretty much everything. I mean, those are basically the questions I wanted to go over with you because I thought about your email. Again, you were talking about circumstances under which they pick up phones, and also, you didn't say when they took her phone, but you did explain in that email a year ago that they took it, dumped the data off, and then returned it to her, and that she had given it up voluntarily. So I was aware that was the case. But this helps quite a bit. Did you know that Lee Merritt?
Look, I'm happy to help I'm having to answer any question that is honestly given to me. And that if I can answer it. If I can't answer it, I can't answer it. It's not how I feel about that.
And I don't expect you to answer every question because, again, I mean, outright, and I said the same thing to other people over the years, is that, we're on opposite sides of many issues, and, you have a job to do.
A lot of times you paint me with a brush without even calling me and asking.
Well, I mean, you may remember.
I'm going to talk to you and give you my opinion.
I called you.
If you agree with me, you agree with me. If you don't, you don't. But I don't think anybody should badmouth me if they haven't even attempted to talk to me.
Well, remember, I did text you. So I was sitting there in Philip Kingston drinking at Barcadia the day after you sent the email to my editor, and I sent you a couple text messages and called you throughout that day.
They were pretty aggressive conversations.
I can tell you the messages are right here. They're still on both our phones. This is Barrett Brown here. Also wanted to ask you about the marijuana that was found in his home and a couple of other things, assuming that's something you can talk about. And of course, I should admit I was being disingenuous. I was not really trying to talk to you about Botham Jean's marijuana. I was just using that kind of just to, you're a police interrogator. You interrogate people.
25 years.
Right.
I'm not stupid.
But anyway, so it wasn't a hostile message in my call.
Yeah, but even you just admitted that it was not genuine.
Yeah, but you didn't know that, so it's not like you were like, oh, I know this guy's taunting me. I mean, come on.
Barrett, I've been doing this for a while, man.
You've been doing it with the Dallas Morning News and some reporters that are.
Years,
I know.
And I've been a cop for almost 25.
So what you're saying is that.
Certain tricks of the trade.
Gotcha. No, I understand that. So what you're saying is that, contrary to what we were talking about a second ago, you actually had realized that I was adversarial. I was not trying to pin anything on Botham Jean, and that as such, and you could detect that, and so you actually weren't going to call me back, and so I had no choice but to write about you without talking to you.
No, that's not true. That is not true. I mean, look at this. I didn't know this was your phone call.
I know.
You just said 210.
I know.
San Antonio. I have some family in San Antonio. Hey, I'll answer it. I never not answer my phone unless I'm in a meeting. So I answered it. I could have hung up on you at any time.
Absolutely. Good.
Anytime.
Absolutely.
And I chose not to do so. Why? I had a good feeling that you might be adversarial, maybe. I had a good feeling that you might be condescending. There's a good chance you probably are taping me. But I got nothing to hide.
Right.
I'm not gonna fight. I'm not gonna fight with you just to fight with you because I want to fight against somebody in the media. If you're gonna give me a reasonable phone call with reasonable questions, with a reasonable tone of voice, then I'm going to have a conversation with you.
Right.
And like I said, we might not agree, but that's okay. We ain't supposed to agree on everything.
Of course. That's common. That's we're professionals in our respective industries, so that's understood. Again, I get all that. I agree with all that. I appreciate that. I guess I don't want to put words in your mouth. I guess can you explain then why you didn't pick up the phone on that day or respond to that text message? Well, again, was it because you knew I was?
Because it was obviously very condescending. I could tell where it was going.
Oh, my text message was condescending.
Yes.
Okay,
obviously I could tell that the tone, in the writing style, I could tell this is not somebody who really wanted to talk to me.
Well, when I called you, did that? I guess when you say not literally, you mean someone who didn't really want to communicate with you, like you didn't really want to listen to your. Okay. Well, I would just say that I think if you look at that article, I think it's pretty clear that I listen very carefully to people. I go over the articles in Dallas Morning News very carefully. I make a case.
You're gonna tell me the article was not having any type of adversary type of tone?
No, it clearly was. No. I'm not saying that at all. I am a militant anarchist revolutionary. I went to prison for 4 years after my involvement in Anonymous. I very clearly in these articles and the one before that attacked the EPD.
You're a militant anarchist revolutionary.
Yes. Who also wins out? Yes, sorry.
So does that mean that you believe in peaceful means or any means?
I'm just as peaceful as you and the Dallas Police Department are. I don't, and one might say arguably,
of saying that you'll shoot people if forced to do so. Is that what you're saying? Because that's the only time, in my personal opinion, that officers shoot people when they are forced to do so. So that must be the exact same thing you're saying.
I think if Amber Geiger's off the force, I can take her spot, right? Because I feel like I have better fire.
Let's go through the academy.
Okay.
Bring it on.
All right. But again, what my point is that no. I would say that again, I do not believe in initiating force or violence. That means governments. That means unless someone has attacked someone else and there is a little bit more oversight in the process, then we've kind of evolved here in the U.S. compared to other sort of cultures of law enforcement and that kind of thing. I don't believe in initiating force. So, I mean, I believe in responding. I'm not a pacifist. I'm opposed to fast.
Okay, let me ask you this, and I'm just wondering.
Sure,
all right, you
sure.
ain't got to answer if you don't want to, but I'm just curious. So let's just say Geiger is found not guilty by these 12 jurors.
Right.
Now, would you say these 12 jurors are a fair representation of the community of Dallas County?
I'm aware. I've seen that Lee married
one Asian and
Sure.
2 whites.
Well, I mean, racially, yeah, it's a great thing, and I mean, there'll be a fair representation of Dallas County if they get things wrong. So they may very well get things wrong. They're definitely racially they are.
But what I'm saying is,
I understand.
The process will have played itself out.
Right, of course, right.
Okay, so there was no circumventing the process. She had her day in court. The jurors found her not guilty, and so would you agree, or you can disagree, that if she's found not guilty by her peers in a fair and honest trial, that no violence should occur?
Yes, absolutely. That's
okay,
violence.
Violence
was never. Hey, I don't walk around with the firearm. Violence is never on the table. I'm a felon. I'm not allowed to. I can't even be in a room with a round. So, but again, even ideologically, when I say I'm a militant anarchist, I mean just someone who says that I'm a militant defender of the U.S., the Constitution. I mean that I am not a pacifist. I'm not a pacifist or a passive citizen.
And I feel you, Barrett. But militant in itself, and you can dissect it in any definition you want to. But the general understanding of militant, when asking the public, would say that it constitutes some type of violence.
Right. Well, the public.
And if you're not that, I'd hate to see you categorize yourself as that, because I think that's disproportionate to what you're trying to do. If that's the case.
Well,
I don't think people like me would talk to people like you if you ascertained yourself as being a militant.
Right. I mean,
and I'm just saying you might want to change that so we just have better conversations.
No, I understand. But I mean, again, the public, I mean, they have certain views of all kinds of things. And I mean, I go by the dictionary definition. The kind of people I'm trying to reach generally are, they try to be precise. And, the dictionary definition of militant is combative and aggressive in support of a political or social cause, and typically
combative and aggressive, which those 2 words just in itself,
I am combative.
People constitute that with violence.
Right. Well,
that's what I'm saying. If you're not a violent person, I'm not saying you have to be pacifist. But if you're not a violent person, I hate to see you categorized as that. That's my point. That's all I'm saying.
I mean, violent person. That's. I mean, do you consider yourself a violent person?
No, I don't.
But you're somebody who would, to the extent that you believe that the procedures and laws or Constitution.
If I'm forced to protect myself or a third person,
right,
then I have to do what I have to do. But no, I have never used force against somebody unless I absolutely have to.
Right, because they initiated it, because they started the force, right? Like they were a threat, or they were engaging.
Or they're assaulting somebody else, and so it forces me to put my hands on them.
Initiating force, right? Yeah, I mean, again, that's the same agreement. I just don't believe that, say, a particular government.
Yeah, but you're trying to get people to believe in your movement and get behind you in your movement. And all I'm saying is, I think you isolate people when you label yourself with something that the general public would deem as aggressive.
Well, that may be true, and I'm sure it's true in many cases. The problem here is that the DOJ has already done that for me, and so I figure, why run from it? There's a dictionary definition. I agree, I'm aggressive and combative sometimes.
So the DOJ considers you a threat, a terrorist?
The DOJ, in their own words, in a transcript, you can see a bunch of articles about it, said that I control the media, that I am trying to overthrow the U.S. government by force, that I attacked the government of the Kingdom of Bahrain, which I did. But no.
The Kingdom of Bahrain?
Yeah, it's a theocracy. It's a monarchy. It's illegitimate, and I was involved.
You attacked it, really?
Well, according to the DOJ prosecutor, what she means is that I was involved in some of the responses to the Bahrain's secret police and kind of their response to protests, democratic protests.
You got a big set of balls on you if you attack them cats, because they chop heads off and shit. They don't even listen to you.
No, Bahrain doesn't do that. They're not them. The Bahrain is pretty mild, but they are pieces of shit. They do bring Saudi Arabian tanks in and they fire tear gas off, and so the tear gas company that sells them the tear gas, we went after that. That's why I owe a lot of money to that company. But anyway, when I say militant, I don't mean to try to turn people off. I'm trying to get them to think about what is force, how is force already present, where is violence already, and what does it mean to start violence as opposed to respond to it? Again, I'm trying to reduce violence, reduce force. I believe that we should minimize government's control over things when we can. And ideally, ultimately, we would develop mechanisms to allow people to work together more without all the force being called in. Like I got the DPD called me twice yesterday by my upstairs neighbor in an hour. First for having two guests over that were smoking cigarettes, and the second because I knocked on her door and asked her why she called the cops. I mean, that's a mentality that doesn't exist in a lot of Western Europe and in many parts abroad. It's not something people would think to do. And so that's part of American cultural.
I think people are just the world we live in.
Yeah.
People no longer will go talk to their neighbor for fear of confrontation.
Absolutely true. Yeah. I mean, there's all kinds of
everybody and their mother's so quick to shoot a motherfucker or something.
There are all kinds of cultural problems. I mean, there are problems, psychoses, that affect different people in different points in history, and and that's one of them. So again, it's all great.
Well, Barrett, I'm gonna be honest with you. I appreciate the phone call. I really do. It's been pretty insightful. I ain't got no bad blood with you. As long as we can talk, civilly like this. If you want to, write about me and kind of dog me out, hell, at least you talk to me first.
I would do so, but actually, I've run out of things to write for in Dallas. I've run out my string in this town, so I can't do that. I was basically just calling just to find own edification, kind of to figure out, hey, did I catch him on this one? Blah blah. But no, I'm moving on from Dallas. I'm moving in a couple months, so you guys will have to get along without me.
I'm not gonna tell you not do anything crazy because it sounds like every once in a while you kind of do that. But just be safe. Just figure out what it's worth and if it's worth it to do it.
Yeah, I'll try to be safe. Thank you very much. Have a good day.
All right, bye.
Bye. Anyway, got them on a couple things that I think are useful. The question is, who could I get this to that would move with it? But there's some points there where I'll have to review it to see exactly. It was a long conversation, 45 minutes, and there's a couple things unrelated to the Amber Geiger shooting and unrelated to this particular issue that come up. My favorite part was when he, and again, he's I never talked to him before. I've seen him get shot down by angry black protesters quite correctly after he said something about a police shooting that he's whatever. And I've seen him, and I've watched him, as we discussed, not call me back and then kind of, pretend after the fact that, oh, it's because of this. I knew you were that thing you just told me. I knew that. And so I would call back, even though I just told you, oh, you need your phone back. I just had to call Mike Maddox because he didn't recognize your number. There was a point at which he says, to make a point about how he would have happily talked to me, he says, well, I didn't know who this number was, and blah, blah, I picked it up. Again, I understand that, Mike Maddox. And I think that goes to my point because I called you from my number and sent you text messages, and you never picked that up. And I was sitting there with my city councilman, who you had no problem messaging with some things that I think were kind of inappropriate, quite frankly. And I said, I think this kind of goes to my point rather than yours. Same deal with we're talking about what the motivation would be and how a court and any actual human being might see two people, one of whom had just murdered her neighbor, two of them who have been sexting up until this point in which she kills someone and then doesn't do too well in the 911 call. It's like I'm not losing a job, blah, blah. Why they might delete those messages. Now, it turns out, we know from this morning that the messages, despite being deleted, were still available. If we might as well take his account seriously, Mattis, regarding what happened. She gave up the phone, didn't realize, oh, you know what? That's not there's a number of things here, like I said. It's possible that when she gave her phone to whoever she physically gave it to, that she did not expect those messages to get to where they were supposed to get to. The fact that they did, obviously, is less incriminating. The fact that she assumed they wouldn't, we can find a parallel there. My favorite instance in terms of how terrible it is. A few years ago, two Dallas officers responds to a call about a man who's suicidal. He's mentally ill. It's this woman's middle-aged son who has severe mental problems. He's sitting in a chair on the street outside their house. He's got a knife. He's sitting there. I remember I watched this from jail, actually, me and my little jail roommates. And the police start shouting orders at him. They're pointing the guns at him. He stands up and is holding the knife, and they shoot him. And then they say, oh, he ran at us with a knife. And then, oops, the guy across the street, he had a security camera on his garage. And so because of that, and only because of that, that mentally ill man who was simply suffering from mental illness, was not threatening anybody, was not endangering anybody, and complied with police orders, rather than go to prison after being shot by the 2 Dallas police who came to help. He was in the hospital, and after a couple of days, the charges were dropped. The attempted murder charges against an officer were dropped. And when I talk to somebody like Matt and all that, it's easy. He's a human being. I'm a human being. We have some of the same enemies. Blah blah, all that. But ultimately, I said I'm telling I'm a militant. What I mean is that there are large numbers of people that deserve to die, and that's always been the case. And that is something that is not even taken. It's taken for granted when expressed by, say, any pundit in Newsweek or Washington Post talking about we should invade this country or that country, or anyone's uncle at a bar saying death penalty for everybody. So long as they are outside the U.S. polity, people will casually and smilingly discuss the options for extending a spate of warfare abroad that we know is killing huge numbers of people who are uninvolved and innocent. But when it comes to discussing redirecting the existing violence and minimizing it, reducing it, and just directing it perhaps in a different way, and in such a manner as a citizenry might decide to do, as it did when creating this government, in a way that has more perhaps transparency. When someone just mentions that as a hypothetical, suddenly it's becomes an alarming thing, which is unfortunate. What it means is that we can do any kind of we can commit any degree of national rape against those abroad, and we can even imprison children and put them in cages. But the second one proposes that, hey, maybe just because someone is a citizen of this country and has some power, why are they off the table, but these 2 children of this individual who Obama droned his son, and then Trump droned his other child, why were they on the table, and why is that a big deal? Anyway, but when I think about what this translates to in terms of the niceness and all that, I kind of feel ashamed for being civil. But on the other hand, you might as well, I suppose. Because again, behind the civility and behind the protocol there and behind the chuckling together, there's violence that's perpetrated, and worse, violence that has every expectation of not being punished and perhaps being rewarded, and will happen over and over again, and which could be reduced in the future if we were to do the right things, if we were to approach this quite the right way, and get the evidence and be clever enough to force it into the public in a way that where the current mayor, just like the previous mayor, feels compelled out of self-interest to reform the police, for instance, in a way that might prevent 3 or 4 shootings of people who shouldn't have been shot over the next couple of years. We would have done our job. But the sad fact is that it is hard to maintain that kind of habit. It's hard for activists, it's hard for people who are on a mission or have strong feelings about injustice, whatever. It's hard to do. It's not instinctual. What we can do is occasionally, when it becomes fun, when we can provide a fun way of going forward, we can encourage people to direct their existing impulses, whatever they may be, in a way that does a great deal of damage, psychological or whatever, to the people that need to be damaged because they're too powerful and they have no morality. That's what Anonymous did, and that's why. And it's happened elsewhere. And it's one of those things, if you get it right, you get the formula right, which we saw a very haphazard accidental version of that years ago. You can start helping to undermine dictatorships, scare off people who previously never felt the need to be scared, and get people who are constantly afraid, give them a sense that maybe they don't have to be. And that's important enough whereby if, someone asks me about violence and I just happen to say I'm a militant anarchist, referring to the dictionary definition of militant, which I read to him, to no end, and explaining what anarchism actually is, and explaining that you guys are the guys who, he said something about, we wouldn't, these officers don't shoot anybody unless it's absolutely necessary. And we're sitting here discussing the Amber Geiger case, where she was sexting, walks into an apartment, isn't paying attention, sees a guy and shoots him twice, and then resumes messaging her partner who's not there, gets on the 911 call, mentions how she's going to lose her job, etc., and so on and so forth. So that's the deal. I'm going to go. I've got realize I have a meeting pursuant to some of these other things, but I've done what I can do for now, and I don't see the local press really taking the ball and running with it, because they haven't thus far. And now people like Jim Schutz are out there intentionally pretending and they're not aware of what came out today in court about her deleting the evidence that is primary to this case, the evidence that speaks to what Jim Schutz himself, and I mention him because he is the best journalist in town, the most honest of them, and he's still a piece of shit who has no business living. He went in early, saying we should give her the benefit of the doubt. No, you guys don't understand. Stop jumping to conclusions, blah, blah. And now as the evidence continues to come out that shows he's wrong, he's pretending it away. And it's not because he has anything to gain, I don't think. I think it's because of the degree of depravity that I've learned so much about in the last year, more than usual. Anyway, I'm going to go. Luckily, again, we don't need the press here because we have some mechanisms. That's what I was referring to, and I have a book coming out next year that already has a lot of this in it. And it will only take about 20 minutes this evening to add in this little update about how right I was and about how much more militant everyone should be, given what actually happens in this country. All right, that's enough of this. I'm tired of my own voice.